Hey Tom, how are you?
Hey, Katie, how are you doing? You ready to talk scripture together?
I am. Welcome everyone back to Scripture Shared for week 3 of our study of Hebrews. We hope that you are studying with other people and that you're deepening your faith by talking more about this scripture and pondering it with other folks. This week is all about faith. And so we are going to be talking about Hebrews 11 and 12. I kind of have the feeling that we've overcome a lot of the hard passages in this book as far as the challenge to our understanding, what we understand about Judaism and the temple and all of that, but I kind of think we're getting into the part that challenges us more in our walk. Like
Mm,
these are the exhortations that tell us like you need to act this way or straighten up and all of that. And so
right,
I
right.
think
The warnings and yeah, challenges that come our way.
and just setting a high bar for faith as well. Like this is the challenge to the way in which we believe. So just jumping in there, the first scripture is about faith, and the author of Hebrews gives a definition of faith. What do you think about that? Does that match your own definition of faith? When I ask you, like, what is faith to you? What would you say?
Yeah, faith is believing something you're not sure of.
Mhm.
So, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite illustrations is if when I had kids, if they came to me and said, and I asked them, "Did you brush your teeth?" and they said yes, and then I went and checked the toothbrush. That's not faith, right? That's I am what is it? A verifying, trust it plus verify. But faith is making a choice that says I'm going to believe something that I can't prove or verify. It's one of the reasons I struggle with some Christian writers who want to sort of try and prove Jesus,
Mhm.
with these sort of a rational proof that Jesus is the Messiah. And I'm like, well, that's not faith. You're not going to prove it to me. At some point, I have to just make that decision. I'm going to believe this, and act upon it. Right. So it's not just believing it; it's also acting upon it.
Yeah, I think
That's
faith.
my view. What
Well,
about you?
it's similar to that. It is the grounding on which I set all of my beliefs and my hopes, and there is, like you said, no proof. This you don't have the senses of like seeing something or hearing it or tasting it to be able to. That form of verification just doesn't work with faith, and so it's what to me connects the thing that I don't see with the things that I know to be true, but it also moves me forward. Like faith is both a grounding and it is what pushes me forward. It gives me that ability each day to live in a certain way that I wouldn't be able to live if I didn't have it. You know,
Yeah,
I
I've heard people say that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty,
mm,
and that uh, somehow I don't even have any sense in which I'm stepping out into the abyss and trusting God. If I'm, just like, oh, I'm so certain, then that doesn't feel like faith to me. That feels like, um, I don't know, something else. But
well,
you know,
like you said,
and
I
when I
mean,
look at these people are people who stepped out into the unknown, and that's what I think faith is.
yeah, I think your point is valid that faith is a form of trust, but it doesn't need to have the verification of certainty behind it for it
Right,
to really
right.
work as trust. It's not like following someone around to prove where they are all of the time. It's just trusting that when they say they're somewhere, that that's where they really are, right? Or something like that. So the author, like you said, this whole list of folks is given probably to counter what the readers of Hebrews would say, which is, wow, that's a high bar to set for faith. And the author is saying to them, it is a high bar, but you can meet it because all of your ancestors have met it. And so he gives them this hall of faith.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Just this list of people who have gone before. Yeah.
And real broken people who have had real challenges. So it's hard for me when someone, okay, I'll give you an example. It's hard for me when a 20-year-old says, use this eye cream. Look, I don't have wrinkles. because I'm like, you're 20. You were never going to have eye wrinkles. I want to see someone that's 50
You did,
that tells me
you
to do
had to
eye
mention
cream.
it. You had to mention it. Look at this. Here you go.
That's right. So it's like, I want to see someone that's 50 that tells me that, right? So I don't want to see someone perfect held up as an example of faith. And the author of Hebrews is like, your people are not perfect. Rahab was a prostitute, and Moses and David were murderers, and they faced insurmountable challenges of being told to leave their homeland and wander. And maybe they would have kids, you'll have kids, but they're feeling like maybe I'll have kids. I don't know. I mean, these are huge
Right,
challenges for them,
right.
and yet their faith overcame.
Yeah. So who are yours? Who's who is in your hall of faith?
I have a hall of faith. They're not all gone. Like when I think about people that inspire me in my faith or help me to move forward, one of them is my mom, who has always told me that she prays for me. And that is so meaningful to me.
Mm,
Because it reminds me of the care that we show to people by praying for them. I mean, that's been one of the best examples for me about how to love someone. Another one who is gone is Bill Denham. You and I have talked about this before, but he is an example of faithful witness of showing us how to really live out what Jesus did. What about
mm.
you? Who's in your hall of faith?
I think more recently, it's been Durwood Fleming, the founding pastor at St. Luke's. Just as I read through the challenges that he was dealing with in the 1950s and the Red Scare and all that went on in that time, and how he sort of brought people together, was very pragmatic, instead of an ideologue. And I just think, wow, here is really somebody who was courageous in a sort of quiet way, and clearly a thinking person, a really smart person. And so I never had the chance really to know him personally, but as I have been reading about him, and just because we got through the 75th anniversary, it's been fresh on my mind.
I think that's why like our inside out habit of telling our stories is so important, because we really get a chance to share with other people or hear other people's stories about how their faith carried them through something hard that we wouldn't have if we weren't so open with saying, this is how God's working in my life, or here's where I saw Jesus, and then letting that be an inspiration to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's meaningful. So all of those folks that are in our hall of faith, that are in this hall of faith for the author of Hebrews, they make up the cloud of witnesses, the people that have gone before us, that are there cheering us on. I love that imagery of the idea of like a stadium. You come to the finish line and there's all these people waiting for you, like at the end of the Olympic Games, cheering you
Right.
on.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Well, and they're not so disconnected. We get this real sense that we still have like a real connection between them. Okay, but here's the thing. Everyone will fall short. My mom, Durwood Fleming, everyone falls short of what
Yep.
Ultimately is perfect example of faith. And
And
so
actually, everyone falls way short.
way.
Not just a little short, but way short, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so that's why we have the example of Jesus, who the author of Hebrews says is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And so what do you think it does for us that we have not just this hall of faith, but that we have Jesus as the perfect example of our faith to look to?
Well, it's the picture on the box, when you're trying to put together the model. I don't know how many times nowadays it's a piece of furniture. It used to be a jigsaw puzzle, but you buy the furniture from IKEA, and you got to have the box over there because you got to figure out how it's supposed to look. And as I try and put my life together, I got to have something that is the model to live and love by, and especially because the model is so misaligned with the world's model of how to live. It's so countercultural in the sense of turn the other cheek. That's not the way you do business. That's not gonna hold anybody accountable. Come on, there's got to be some accountability. his model is just, I read, the words of Jesus and Matthew 5 through 7 over and over and over and over and over again, because while Paul is all full of this, kind of pragmatic, how to apply things, etc., the model is not Paul. The model is Jesus, and that's the model I'm following.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, let's switch gears for a little bit because there's another really interesting passage in this selection of verses. Uh, verse 13 is talking about Abraham, this in this hall of faith, and how Abraham died without receiving the promises, but was able to see them and greet them from a distance and welcome them. And I think that's a really interesting passage. This idea that he almost held them as if they were real. Like because of his faith, the assurance and the conviction of his faith, those promises were as real to him as if he really had been the true owner of the promised land or had seen all of his descendants.
Yeah, I mean, the visual picture of him standing up on Mount Nebo looking over into the promised land, and like I can really see them. Hey, promised land. He greeted them. Hey, promised land. But didn't get to take hold of it. But he still, interestingly, felt he had done what he needed to do. I mean, he had, died happy. I would put it that way, because he got to see the promises.
Well, and his faith wasn't an empty hope. Like it wasn't this empty optimism of, well, I think this will come to pass for my descendants. I
Right.
assume this is the case. He really, it was as real to him as if it had happened to him because God promised it. And so his faith said, if God promises it, I'm going to trust that it's really happening. And so I know
Mm.
that's the case. And I think for us, it's like we kind of want to wait until promises are fulfilled. Like we want to wait and our version of promises, right? So like we want to wait till that healing comes or until that success comes or whatever it is. And we don't really trust that like God is saying, I will bless you. I am there with you always. We're kind of like, prove it.
So it's kind of this idea of greeting the promises, or greeting the fulfilled promises, but not receiving them, it's such an interesting and powerful picture, because what it says is, if I have faith, the things that God is doing around me are things I can see and interpret and understand as signs of the promise, and welcome them in that sense. Let them strengthen my faith. Let them lift me up, but recognize that there's still way more to come, and believe in that.
So what do you
That's
think,
great.
like for us, what does that mean for us today? St. Luke's, what does that mean for our community? What is the promise?
Well, I mean, we've got this, I was reading this image just a few verses before in chapter 11, where, and it's partly because it's so much a part of the rhetoric and the language we use here about our mission statement, is, um, we see our vision as a city transformed by the love of Jesus. So this transformed city, and we partly mean Houston. We mean, that's the pragmatic piece, but we really mean the city of God. And I just, here in verse 10, it says, he's talking about Abraham still. He says, for he looked forward to that city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God.
Mm.
This, the city of God that is to be, that we can catch glimpses of as we, serve the poor, and as we address the issues, the evils of the world, the demons we're called to cast out in the world around us. And when we see that, we're seeing glimpses of the city that is to be, that we believe is being built by the architect, who is God. I don't know. I love that picture of the city of God that is to be.
I do too. And I love, it says the city that has foundations. And we know that that word for foundations is the same as the word of assurance for faith, right? So it's like, this is the thing that undergirds it,
Right.
undergirded by our faith in God doing this. Well, good. Well, this week set a high bar for faith. Fortunately, we have a hall of faith. We want to challenge you all to think about who's in your hall of faith, and how they've lifted you up. And then we have Jesus, who is the perfecter of our faith. So we hope you have a good discussion with your group this week, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.